Welcome to Now is the Time from MediaU, accelerated learning for today's content creators and media makers of all kinds. I'm Adam Leipzig, the founder of MediaU. Now is the time because this is the time to be on our game for what comes next. Glad you're here.
Welcome, everybody in Cyberland. How are you? I'm going to do some waves. Hope everyone's doing well. Today, we have an incredibly special guest, one that I've been very anxious and looking forward to having a conversation with. He is what I like to call like the modern day Renaissance man. He's done a little bit of everything, and everything he's done, he's excelled at. From being an executive in telecommunications, he was actually listed as one of the 50 most influential African Americans in technology. He comes from tech, and he also just got into film very recently, started a company called Soulidifly Productions, and has produced many incredible films, including One Angry Black Man that we found out live last time we spoke that it was getting theatrical distribution. So I am beyond honored to introduce the producer of that film and many others, Mr. BK Fulton. How are you, sir? How are you? Everybody doing one of those?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here because in sort of the lifeline of these conversations we've been having, we've had many privileges of interviewing filmmakers and artists, and to speak with a producer, I think is such a fascinating conversation to be had, because it's a different part of this industry that is equally as important, and one that isn't really fully understood outside of the people who do it day to day.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I mean, there's so much to talk about, but I just want to talk about it first. So when you got into filmmaking after having an illustrious career in technology, working in major corporations, telecommunication corporations, why then go into becoming an independent film producer? There's a weird, that's a weird turn. It's an interesting turn.
You know, there's method to the madness. That's the $1 million question. The short version is storytelling changed my life. I spent my first 50 years doing what I was trained to do, and I felt like I could spend the next 50 years doing what I was made to do. And I feel like I was made to tell these stories. How stories changed my life. So I was flunking out of engineering school, and I was dating a little too much and playing a little too much basketball and not going to class enough. And I went to the library to plan my escape from Virginia Tech. And I landed in the E185.5 section of the Dewey Decimal System. That's the section on stories about Black people. And it was stories that I hadn't read, stories about accomplishments and inventions. And it lit a fire in me. So I went from the probation list to the dean's list to the board of directors of my alma mater. And I realized that if reading about powerful stories could change your life, what would happen if I put it on the big screen with a really good script, great music, great actors? And so my next act was born. And I said, I'm going to tell these stories. I'm going to change the narrative. I'm not going to tell the story from the sorrow of my experience. So I'm not going to focus on enslavement pictures or domestic violence pictures or boys in the hood pictures. I mean, I'm tired of Pookie getting shot. I want to tell the stories that haven't been told, those of Bass Reeves, our movie Hell on the Border, the stories of love, stories of protagonists that are intellectual but still disturbed, like Mike in One Angry Black Man. And we set out to make about 70 films, and we're having fun doing it.
Well, one of the things that was fascinating when we have spoken, and it was a very kind of powerful thesis, was attesting to what you just said, was using the medium for inspiration, to inspire, to create dialogue, not to break you down. It is the most powerful medium in the world. And using it to tell a story that, like you said, that is uplifting, that that doesn't fall into the stereotypes of what people perceive us as. It's not the easiest road to take because you're breaking a format that's already existed and proven to be successful. So you're going against the grain right off the bat, which kind of segues into One Angry Black Man, which was a film that, you know, I've seen. It's out, it's readily available on all platforms. Like I said in the beginning, it's now going to be theatrically distributed. So this was a movie that I'm pretty sure many producers would have probably, you know, say no to, because you're talking about a film that is everyone sitting down and talking about a particular experience, going into to really establish African-American authors. But so you as a producer, which is I think the big question, what did you see in that script? What did you see in Menelik as a director that was like, okay, I'm going to produce this? And what did that entail from your end for this particular project?
I mean, I saw myself. I was a kid at a predominantly white university, and part of that first few years of struggle was trying to fit in. And so I found myself doing the things I was familiar with, hanging with my boys and playing ball, instead of reading the textbooks and going to class. I figured that out too, after I figured out who I was. And so for me, you know, the script felt authentic. And Menelik, as a writer, was very clear about what he wanted to do. And frankly, it wasn't going to cost me a boatload of money because I paid for it out of my retirement. We actually financed 2 films at the same time because I'm a business guy. And I said, if one of them stinks like hell, maybe the other one will do something. Hey, I'm a business guy.
From a producer standpoint, you get this script, you saw a very contained story, right? Physically, like it's all predominantly takes place in a room. What I really want to get across from like the producer's mentality is that how did you then go about, all right, what were the steps for you to like, I'm going to make this happen outside of financing, which is obviously a big part of filmmaking? Yeah. How did you kind of go about bringing the story to life to give, when everything's kind of against you? You have a drama that's entirely, you know, word driven, and you have a first time director. Does that fear you as a producer?
It didn't scare me too much, and maybe I didn't know enough early on not to be scared, and that probably worked in my favor. But we assembled a team at Soulidifly. So the guy who helped Spike Lee to found 40 Acres and a Mule is on the team, Monty Ross. My COO understudied under Joel Schumacher and Martin Scorsese and helped to create the original Movie Pass. So I brought these guys in. My cinematographer on my first 2 films, Hans Charles, was the cinematographer for Ava DuVernay's The 13th. So I had people with experience, and Hans was the one that told me about the script that Menelik had. And so there was a chemistry there. We had actually got together to fund another film we haven't done yet, and it was a film based on a script that was written from a novel that I did called Love's Insurrection. And, you know, the last company I ran was a multi-billion-dollar company. So they said, oh, you know, it's going to take $10 million to make this period piece. And I was like, oh, that's nothing. Rounding error in my former life. Well, independent filmmaker, $10 million is not so much of a rounding error. and so it was Monty. We got together and we prayed and said, all right, Monty was like, how many dinners are you away from $10 million? I said, we're a lot of damn dinners away from $10 million unless you're going to write a check. And so then we're like, oh, this isn't going to work. So then Hans said, well, I know somebody has a script. The person who was going to direct Love's Insurrection said, well, I have this thing that's been on the shelf for 10 years. I was like, okay, what are the numbers? And the numbers were within reason. And Monty said, how many dinners are you away from? And I'm like, we are 0 dinners away. We can do this tomorrow, but I got to see the scripts. And when I read the scripts, both of them were authentic. And One Angry really just ran away with the festivals that we got into, the awards, without any sex and any gratuitous violence. This film just kept showing up. It won the Oscar Michaud Award. It typically placed first, second, and third. But so it was a bit of a leap of faith. But I went with, I could relate to the script. We had talented people, and the writer-director really had passion about what he was doing. So we filmed it in one setting and it was hot as hell, but they didn't give up. They didn't stop. We had one actor that flew in. So we had one kind of known talent, Miguel Nunez, and he was a trooper, he's a friend. And he shows up in the Bronx and he's got these Louis Vuitton bags and sneakers. And he said, it's hot as hell in here. I don't have the dressing room. I was like, you know what, when we met, you told me you bought a one-way ticket to Hollywood and you were homeless for a minute and you figured it out. You know what? I need that guy to show up on the set. And he did, and he killed it. And it was really good.
What do you look for as a producer where you say outside of, like, what does that gut tell you when you're reading scripts? You're like, this is
for me,
and more importantly, what do you also look for from a filmmaker? That you're like, this is the guy I'm gonna back behind.
For me, because this work is really about leaving a legacy of important art, I look for the authenticity. I look for the message. I believe in media with the message. As you said, we have a very powerful tool in film, and I take it as a responsibility to use it in a way where it does some good. It provides some lift. I mean, let's face it, the world is crazy right now. A lot of things that we don't agree with are happening, and the education system feels broken in many ways. The political system feels broken in many ways. People don't go to the faith-based experiences like we did when I was growing up, where you had to go to church every Sunday or whatever. So that type of inculcation is not as much the norm as it might have been earlier in history. And so, but what are people doing? They're turning to their screens, they're turning to film, they're turning to art. So guess what? Art is the pill. Art is that new thing, so, okay, I can send you to the hospital to fix your bones, but where do I send you to fix your heart, to align your moral compass, to get your brain reconfigured and expanded to a new idea? I take you to the theater. I take you to the cinema. I bring you into my world and I show you something different, a new way to look at things, a new way to consider things. Everybody that's seen One Angry Black Man has said, that film made me think. Or, oh my God, I gotta run to the library and get some books and read some of those books. I had one person who's the general counsel of a major corporation, and he said, I never read any of those books. It's a white guy. And he said, I realized how little I know about your community and how much I could learn about your community, and I really have to listen and pay more attention. One of our characters in the movie says, I have to read deeper. And so we purposefully had people to talk authentically from different walks of life, different political persuasions. And so it was real. We used real data when we talked about voting and things like that. And so I think when people see the film, they can see themselves in one character or another. And we're worried about our sons and daughters. We're worried about how our country is going to be run and what we're going to leave behind. And so what I look for in a production team or writer-director is somebody who shares that passion for authenticity. I think that's critically important today. I mean, I love great actors and actresses, and we're in a celebrity culture, but just because you're an actor or an actress, it doesn't make you an activist. I used to work in the civil rights world. I understand that world and what it takes to create serious change. I'm glad the celebrities are lending their voices to things, and I think if we can work together, the producers, the actors, the writers, directors, and produce stuff with the heart, then we can change hearts, we can change minds.
What do you say as a producer specifically, especially in the world of independent film, when you're dealing a lot of times with first-time directors or people that really are looking for that opportunity? What do you see your role being? Like, what is your role through this process when you're making a film as powerful as it was with, relatively unknown kind of new
voice within the landscape. I think a lot of directors fear that producers are scared of that and they don't know the role of what the producer is. Like, what do you see that being?
What I see is there's a sea of talent. Nobody has a crystal ball, so we don't know how anything's really going to come out. I mean, the release of the movie during a pandemic when people are home, while studios are shut down, during the anniversary of the Tulsa race riots, right after an unlawful murder, and the people are upset, and my film's called One Angry Black Man, was a bit of divine timing that is outside of my control. That said, I'm the kind of producer that doesn't need to get in the way. I'm not pushing my will on the team. Once I make a decision, this is the script we're going to fund, this is the person we're going to support, I tend to get back and then step in and fill the gaps. You know, I knock the distractions away, and then, you know, this in the I guess the world of show business, my strength is particularly the business side. So I make sure that that's cared for and that we have everything in place so that the team with a reasonable budget can deliver and produce the art. And then we look at it and we decide if it's true. And then we work on the distribution. I mean, all of our films, if you're talking about independent, from the first film, all 5 that we've released have gotten worldwide distribution. 3 out of 5 have been theatrical. And I've got 3 or 4 on deck, and all of those will get distribution. I mean, I'm having the 180-degree opposite experience that most independents have, where their films don't really get distribution. All of ours have. And
what do you think that is? Why do you think that you've been able to, as a producer, been able to kind of find that immediate success?
Because I don't come in as a know-it-all. I come in and I listen to the people that have experience. I'll reach out to people like Adam and others who've been to the big dance, and I will follow my instincts, but also listen to my advisors. And then again, if it speaks to me in an authentic way, I've had a fair amount of success using this model of do I think it plays well? Does it ring true? I think people are ready for that truth, and I'm willing to take a chance on it. And you know, what is life but taking a chance? And there's no crystal ball. You don't know for sure.
What do you, and for all the young filmmakers watching, that dynamic between a producer and director, I think, is an incredibly important relationship, because you kind of bounce off each other because you're coming at it from different angles. You're, like you said, you're coming at it from a business perspective. You're coming at it from an analytical perspective as much as creative perspective, where the director is really kind of zoned in on the creative side. What, in your mind, what that relationship should be in the best sense, and which I imagine it was on One Angry Black Man, just because of the result.
Sure. I think very close relationship. We know each other's families. We talk a lot. There is a trust that was established early on. And so Menelik, I mean, I could say, hey, Menelik, I'm going to send you a document. I need you to sign it. He didn't ask me any questions. He'd send me something. BK, we need this to happen. We need some resources for this or that. I didn't ask a lot of questions. After we made the decision to go and we agreed on what the budget ought to be, then we went for it.
So it's a built on trust.
Right.
And it's something earned, but then it's something that needs to be maintained.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, by the way, everyone watching, anyone who has questions, please put them on the chat, because I would love to ask them and have BK have an opportunity to answer. You know, one of the things that I think is incredibly important about pretty much everything, kind of like the thesis of what you said, was that you have a foundation of the stories you want to tell. Not necessarily the genre, not necessarily it has to be this or I'm not touching it, but there's a foundation which is truth. Do you think that in today's climate, now more than ever, the success, and obviously having your 5 films distributed, and do you think that the success lies in in the pursuit of the authenticity, whatever it is?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that has been our experience. I'm live in Virginia, and I just got a text from the governor a few minutes ago. He was just on TV. He's a friend, and was this big brouhaha over these large Confederate monuments that are along one of the main boulevards in town. And he finally decided that I'm going to take it down. And then the legislature or the General Assembly passed a bill to allow the localities to decide as to the other monuments. And so the mayor has decided to take down the remainder of them. And it's got people are out in the streets, they're going back and forth. And one of the things that we've been able to do to lend support is provide media that helps people to appreciate the dynamics of what's going on. We've been asked to write op-ed articles. So just today, I wrote an article, just this weekend, I wrote an article that's already been published in a couple of places. And people are responding to these authentic messages. I think that's a huge part of the secret sauce. You mentioned the relationship, knowing the business was critically important for us. We also have gotten to know our distributor partners well. I mean, we've distributed with Gravitas Ventures, Lionsgate, Byron Allen's Freestyle Digital Media is doing One Angry. And so we now map this stuff out before we start any of the principal photography. And so we know what is going to happen, or we at least have an idea. I mean, film is still one of the few things where you spend all the money before you know what you got. But if you
but it's interesting because I think a lot of filmmakers are kind of battling that. It's like by trying to write and direct your first film, which is the Mount Everest of your career. Right. What is that story? And I think it's refreshing to hear a producer who finances saying, don't be scared to find your authentic voice. That isn't going to be a recipe for failure. It might take a little longer, right, but when it gets made, as to One Angry Black Man could tell you, the results are in the results are in the pudding. Like, this is now a theatrically distributed, incredibly low budget film.
Yeah. So think about this. So, all right, you walk into a restaurant and you got bologna sandwich, bologna sandwich, bologna sandwich, tuna fish. Bologna sandwich, bologna sandwich, bologna sandwich, tuna fish. One day you're gonna try the tuna fish, even if you love bologna sandwiches, because
that's a weird restaurant, man. I don't think I'll go to that restaurant.
But here's the point. Yeah. Here's the point. In a world of a bunch of bologna sandwiches,
right,
that writer director has to do something different. If they just make another bologna sandwich, then they may randomly get picked or get passed over. But if they've got something special, when people watch One Angry, they assumed one thing. They whatever the stereotype they have for those words is what they bring when they sit down. When they leave the film, they walk away with something different. We love it.
I thought that was a brilliant decision on the title. We actually had some questions from the audiences that I would love for you to answer, and they're fascinating questions. This is from Jordan. He says that you say that your stories saved you, and that's what drives you to tell stories. What kind of stories would you like to tell that you have not yet been able to tell up to this point?
There's one I'm working on. It's about a mulatto named Saint George.
By the way, you're gonna have like 100 pitches from all of us, like in 20 minutes.
That's cool. Let's get it. But Saint George was the champion fencer of all of Europe in the late 1700s. Saint George was a virtuoso on the violin. Marie Antoinette asked him to head the Symphony of France. Mozart went to France. He was about 12, 13 years younger than Saint George to learn from the greats. Chevalier was the greatest. He lived in the same building as Saint George. There's no way he's not influenced by the top violinists in France. Chevalier also believed in liberty. And so he created a legion of 1,000 mixed race and African swashbucklers who fought for France. And guess what? One of his lieutenants was T. Alexander Dumas, father of Alexander Dumas, who wrote The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. So to summarize, the cornerstones of French literature, influencer of Mozart and the best violinist of his time, and the guy who's responsible for the current stance in on-guard stance in fencing, is all the same guy, and nobody knows about it. Those are the kinds of stories I want to tell.
We'll be accepting pitches for the next 15 minutes. No, that's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating story. This is another question, and this is going back to when you were talking about what's going on in your hometown. You mentioned the Confederate statues are in fact coming down. How do you feel about films made decades ago that reinforce biases we don't want in our society now, either racial, gender, sexual orientation? Because films have almost been like a representation of the society that we're living in. And you can take it back to Birth of a Nation at the turn of the century. Right. So how do you feel about those films being made when they did, and what should happen to them in regards to where we are in society today?
Well, I think images, capture a point in time. And so I am not a fan of taking old films and getting rid of them or discarding them.
Like Gone with the Wind was a very big story.
Right. I think monuments are different because they're in our world today, and they can be shifted to different locations for the mental record or what have you. But films, I mean, you mentioned Birth of a Nation. So Birth of a Nation came out in, I think it was 1915.
Yeah.
And right away, a number of African-American filmmakers started creating film companies. The first response was a Frederick Douglass film company by a doctor in New Jersey, because he didn't want that image to be the prevailing narrative. And he made 4 films. It's hard to find the films. The first one was A Black Lawyer Wins His Case. There was a World War I documentary that many say was probably one of the best war documentaries ever done. So those are the kind of things that were done. A lot of people know Oscar Micheaux and the Lincoln Film Company that came in 1916. Mm-hmm. But Frederick Douglass Film Company was actually 1915. But so there was this response to tell more accurate narratives. And I feel like I've aligned myself with the push to do that. And throughout history, people of good conscience, people of goodwill have come together and worked together to provide these more complete stories. We've, as far as African Americans are concerned, the quilt of expression in cinema is heavy on chattel slavery. It's heavy on civil rights. It's heavy on sports and basketball and football. And you don't get as many of the stories that talk about, open heart surgery or the blood plasma or Lewis Latimer and lights. I mean, most people don't know that it was a petite African-American woman who invented GPS. We use it every day. And so for that kid, I was an engineering student and I didn't know that. So for that kid who doesn't know that he or she can be an engineer because the engineers they see don't look like them, I think art can help to fix that. And it doesn't have to be in people's face in a hard way. You put it on the screen, and things that are on the screen or things that are on the wall are important things. And it's up, I think we're the new kind of Robin Hoods or missionaries or whatever your favorite evangelist is. It's up to us to see a world as it should be. And the good news is there's so many authentic, real, powerful stories that haven't been told that we've got a treasure trove to go through. With your background, Latinx, I'm sure there's stuff that you could teach me and stories you could tell me about. There's wonderful triumph from the Jewish community, Native American community, the Asian community. There's some stories about women that we have underappreciated. And I think the time is right to recalibrate our hearts and moral compass. And art is a prime tool to do that. We are competing with so much now, 500 channels, celebrities with hundreds of millions of followers, who knows what they're telling their followers. And so I think the folk who've been around a little longer and may know a little more need to engage and embrace the tools of our time to tell the stories that the people need to hear.
Yeah, I'm not following that. FYI, I'm not. If you're looking at me to say something, you're mistaken, sir. You know, this has been the
let me say this.
Yeah.
Let me say this then.
Yeah.
A very important point, because oftentimes when we throw our hands up and we give up, we say, well, they're bad kids or whatever. And what I say back is, if they don't learn, we did not teach. If they don't learn, we did not teach. I do not blame it on the kids we created and we're supposed to have raised. If they don't get that they have to pay it forward, if they don't get that it's important to be excellent, if they don't get that they fall and get up and try again. You start where you are, you use what you have, you do what you can. Wash and repeat. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. We are artists. We have cinema. We have media. We have the most powerful tool known to us at this time to fix hearts, to fix minds. And we just got to get about the work.
BK, I wish you were in an actual audience because it would be roaring in applause right now, but it's been an incredible honor to have this conversation with you. I know it's going to be the first of many to the MediaU family. We want to thank MediaU for, again, hosting, an incredible conversation, one that definitely leaves the filmmakers with hope, and, brother, it's been an honor, man. It really has.
Same here. Pleasure. Let's do it again soon.
Very soon. All right, guys. I want everyone to stay safe, and we will see you guys very soon.
Send me some scripts.
Scripts are coming. Scripts are coming. All right, guys.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Take care. Be safe.
Thanks for joining us. Please make sure to sign up for our private Facebook group so you can reach out to us, let us know who you'd like to talk with, who you'd like us to interview, what you'd like to learn, because MediaU is here for you. We offer accelerated learning from current working professionals for content creators and media makers. May you and everyone in your circle stay healthy, safe, creative. For MediaU's Now is the Time. We'll see you next time.